We're inside the GSN newsroom with Giulio Bonifacio, the CEO of Sabre Gold Mines, that trades under the symbol SGLD on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and it trades in the USA under SGLD.F. Giulio, can you start out by giving me a bit of an overview of Sabre Gold Mines? What do you have? What are your objectives with this company?
We've just recently closed an acquisition of a company called Golden Predator. With that came a wealth of short-term investments, but as well a number of projects that we really like. One specifically called Brewery Creek that was a former producer. We've recently put forth a preliminary economic assessment with some very, very good results. And there's just an ability to take that one forward, add more ounces, and then move it to a feasibility stage. And then ultimately, our target is to get that project into production within the next 3 to 4 years. Permitting is readily achievable. It is brownfield, so it was a former producer. The other asset that we had within the mix at Sabre, which was previously called Arizona Gold, is a project called Copperstone. It's not copper, which confuses people by way of its name, but it's a former gold producer that had an open pit that produced about 500,000 ounces at close to 3 grams. It is fully permitted. The intent is to chase and access the underground higher grade deposit that runs in the range of 6 to 7 grams, which is pretty high grade. That project just has a wealth of upside and opportunity. But what differentiates us from many companies is that it's just not about one project that we're going to drill out and grow and hope we get taken out and eventually go through the various stages of development from drilling to a resource update, preliminary economic assessment, feasibility, and then funding. Copperstone is a restart, and it's something that with the top-up funding that we need, and we can speak to that appropriately, is something that we can put into production within the next 9 to 12 months. And so it will be cash flow generating, very, very good margins. And the thought process very simply is, instead of relying on the capital markets on an ongoing continual basis, let's look at taking this project forward, testing it out further in terms of adding ounces, which we think is arguably an opportunity. If anything, Copperstone has been capital starved. I think the same applies to Brewery Creek, and that was sort of the rationale behind the merger. Let's grow a growth platform, do it in a slightly different way, and bring on the right people that we need to allow us to achieve and execute appropriately.
You've had quite a bit of news coming out on Copperstone. I'd like to focus on that. Let's talk a bit for a minute about the permit. So it's fully permitted. Obviously, that's a de-risker, but I'd like to qualify that a bit more. Let's say you had the same geological asset also in Arizona with the same infrastructure, but all the permits were pulled and you had to start again. How difficult is that? How long would it take?
That can be a very, very lengthy process. There's projects in Arizona that remain unpermitted, and they've attempted to permit certain assets and projects in the state of Arizona, and by one count it's close to 10 to 12 years, and they still haven't achieved what they needed to do to move the project into production. So the benefit of a Copperstone was it was a former producer. It was previously permitted. Then the permits were modified to allow it to process by way of a 350 ton a day mill, shipping out a float concentrate. We've modified as Arizona Gold / Sabre the permits in 2020. It was took us approximately 18 months. We had to modify our state permits as well as our federal permit by way of a plan of operations, which now allows us to process at 600 tons per day, which allows us to increase our production profile. And then secondly, allow us to pour doré on site. And the only way you can do that is by way of leaching and applying cyanide. So you had to modify both your water quality and air quality permits, all of which has been done and behind us. So, that also is what differentiates us. Permitting is an area that I know rather well. Based on some past experiences in the state of Nevada. But the point that really should be focused in on is, not very common to have a project that's fully permitted.
Tell me about the past production profile of Copperstone. How much was it producing?
At the top 150 meters is where 500,000 ounces were produced at close to 3 grams. And on an open pit, that's fantastic by today's standards. It was a very profitable operation, even when gold at the time was closer to $300. We are accessing the underground deposit. We've got 4,300 meters of underground development, and we've continued to drill it further from underground drill stations. And so And that grade profile in certain areas, again, plus 20 grams, plus 30 grams. Overall blended average that we're working with is close to 6.5 grams, 7 grams.
Where do you anticipate raising the $35 million to put Copperstone back in production?
The critical source for us will be a lending facility with third-party lenders.
Yeah.
We'll likely look to remove some of the existing debt because the debt holders are big shareholders of Sabre, and so we'll look at some sort of debt conversion. We'll have to raise a modest amount of equity, and so we're going to do it on a stage basis to minimize dilution. We also have short-term investments, which will, based on the market today, have a pretty reasonable value. So what I'm intending to do here is minimize the equity that has to come into the equation and bring in the debt portion, and we'll advance in those discussions, which, also something I signal in the press release that we'll be coming out with something hopefully by Q2. But, I'd appreciate, most people should appreciate if you've ever done it, that we have several counterparties in this mix. We have a streaming group.
Yeah.
We have existing lenders. We have other stakeholders. And so the lender that's going to step in will want to be in the first position. And so you have to communicate that with each of those groups and get, general agreement across the board.
Tell me more about the streaming deal. How much money have you raised through them? How much is still to come? And what will you owe them when this goes into production?
We just simply have to deliver gold against the stream. We've received 12 of 18, made it very clear that the final 6 would only come into play once we've got a full funding package in place, which is what I'm working on. So you may see a variation to that existing stream. What we're trying to do is improve the bottom line on the margins. What we have to currently deliver, if you looked at getting the final tranche from those folks, and again, in discussions with them, because they've been very supportive. It's Star Royalties. Their chairman is also on our board. And so again, they look at this project as, these aren't easily found, being able to take a project into production well located for what is a modest amount of capital. But if we were to get the final tranche, we would have to deliver 9.9% of our production to 21,000 ounces. Then we reduce that down to 6.6% for a further 6,200 ounces, and thereafter it would trail down to 1.2%. So that's a burden on the project, but the higher the gold price kind of mitigates that.
Giulio, for most of the last year, you've had about 630 million shares outstanding. You've been trading between 6 and 10 cents. At the last general meeting, there was a motion to permit share consolidation. Can you speak to that?
The idea there simply gets back to the share count. It is a number that is beyond what it should be. I think it also works against us with respect to certain investors and their mandates. They won't typically buy into companies that trade below a certain level. Typically below 50 cents is an area that's a hot button for many. Some people make the assumption that share consolidations means that the share price will languish. I completely disagree with that.
I think investors sometimes don't know or they forget. If you own 5% of Sabre Gold pre-consolidation, you still own 5% of Sabre Gold. It makes no difference to your equity position.
It's really about setting the stage, if you will. We've done some fantastic work at Copperstone. It just continues to improve. We know where we sit on that one. And we're very pleased with Brewery Creek and even some of the other assets that came into the mix. And so when you look at it, now's a great time to sort of hit the reset, if you want to use that term.
So you've got a curse and a blessing in that you've got 2 projects that are both moving forward quite aggressively. So it's a bit of a juggling act. Looking forward to the rest of 2022, what kind of news flow, what kind of activity would you expect from both these projects?
Well, I think Brewery Creek, that's a simpler question to answer. We're going to go back in. There's just so many targets. It's 180 square kilometers. We've just scratched the surface in terms of what that project looks like with the PA results, which are, very positive. We want to go back in with the drill bit, add more ounces, look at conversion of some of the inferred, but mostly expand upon what we currently have. And then on Copperstone, that's more about showing how we're moving that forward and getting it into production. But, I think you'll see that if we're able to do that, the value re-rate on that alone takes us beyond a certain threshold. And then, the top up, if you will, and the growth is both at Copperstone and Burry Creek.
Thank you very much for your time today, Giulio. I look forward to continuing to follow this story.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.